fam, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hi, my name is Caitlin. I'm a military spouse and I make all sorts of videos related to that content, which is what today's video is about if you have clicked on it. So recently I've seen an abundance of questions regarding what it's like getting started on the island of Guam and as you PCS in here. So things related to getting housing set up, of what we have for medical options, what we have for cell phone services, and things of that nature. So I thought I would put together a video of what to expect as you get to island and kind of those first steps or first pieces that you need to get set up within like the first week or two. So stay tuned if that is something you're interested in. So as you guys are getting to the island, you guys are going to be coming in one of two ways. So you're either going to come in on the Patriot Express flight, which they nickname the PE flight, which takes off out of Seattle, Washington, SeaTac Airport, and then it comes to Andersen Air Force Base. Typically there is a pit stop somewhere in between. When we flew on the Patriot Express, we stopped in Alaska for refueling. I have a whole video on my experience with the PE flight. I'll link it up in the top corner if that's something you're interested in watching, but for now we'll just give you the basics. So SeaTac to Andersen Air Force. Andersen Air Force is about 40 minutes away from the naval base. I will disclaimer that this video is mainly targeted to Navy families because that is my experience. That's what we are, what branch we are. So I'm not sure if Air Force has the same policies or Coast Guard, so just keep that in mind. But for the most part, this information can relate to any sort of military branch. But you will land in Andersen Air Force Base 40 minutes away from Naval Base. So that is option one. Option two is to fly commercial, and United is the flight that flies into Guam. You'd fly into Guam National Airport, and that is about 20-ish minutes, I want to say, 30 minutes away from the naval base. So you fly in either to Andersen Air Force Base or into the airport. And typically you're going to have a sponsor. That's what we had. We kind of flew in the midst of COVID, so we ended up having to quarantine. That's no longer a thing, but you will have a sponsor that you are coordinating with your command. I've heard mixed things about this. You either get someone who's really good, or you might end up with a kind of cruddy sponsor. We did get we lucked out. We got a good sponsor that took really good care of us. But they are the ones who are going to be working with you to coordinate you coming into the island, and also be the ones to pick you up from either the airport or the Andersen Air Force tarmac. So they are going to be taking you to wherever your lodging is. So typically lodging, they are going to put you up in the Navy lodging hotel here on Naval Base Guam. I do know some people who stayed at the actual hotel, or they also own a bunch of houses that are basically the same houses if you choose to live on base. They are just renovated as lodging. So they're owned by NGIS, which is great because you end up with a full-blown house, which is nice in the event that you don't get offered a house or you're still looking for a house. You get to stay there longer. So you will be put up in NGIS. If for some reason there was an abundance of people PCSing in and there's no space, then you will get TLA to go out in town. So there is a list of approved hotels that fall under TLA or that you can receive TLA for, and you basically get to choose from any of those on the list. Obviously there's some that are better than others, because if you're going to be staying somewhere for an extensive period of time, NGIS is really nice because in the hotel they have like kitchens to cook in. If you end up in a house, you have a full-blown kitchen. If you're living out of a hotel for a long extended period of time, it's really inconvenient to be at a hotel where you're not able to cook. So just keep that in mind. But so you'll either be in lodging out in town or you're going to be at NGIS. Typically, like I said, they'll try to put you up in NGIS first. With that being said, I highly, I can't stress this enough, to save as much money as you can. It can get really expensive, so you get reimbursed obviously for all of your travel and your hotel stays coming overseas, but you don't necessarily get that money up front. You have to file and get reimbursed for it. So you do get to put stuff on your government credit card if you have one, which is what we did, but it is capped out at a certain limit. So if you go above that limit and you're spending, then you're gonna have to forfeit that either on your credit card or out of your savings account. And so I highly recommend saving money because it can get really, really expensive. So once you are set up on island, there is the main categories that you guys are going to want to know about or to get set up on. The first one is going to be housing. So you're going to want to start thinking about whether you want to live on base or whether you want to live off base out in town. So if you're going to want to live on base, the people that you're going to want to get in contact with is going to be housing. I highly recommend doing this as soon as possible. When we got here, you couldn't just go to the office because they were shut down for COVID. I'm not sure if they're open up now, but if not, then you can call them and start the paperwork process. There is a bunch of paperwork that you have to fill out. You have to supply them with your orders and a bunch of other stuff to be put on the wait list for a house. So do this as soon as possible. What's nice about it, the wait list, is that it's not based off of the day that you arrived on island. It's based off when you detached from your command. So say you detached from your command and then you went to school like my husband had to do. We were in transit for a hot minute, and so we were able to be pretty high on the wait list because, like I said, it's when you detach from your command. So honestly, I recommend getting on the wait list as soon as possible. You, however, cannot get on the wait list until you are physically on island, which leads me into my next step, that you should fill out what is called HEAT. HEAT is Housing Early Application. I can't remember what the T stands for. It's like an early application. You can apply for this before you get to island so that all your paperwork is processed, and then you can immediately be put on the wait list when you get to island. So I highly recommend having your spouse or service member look into that and filling that out before you get to island, just so you're taken care of. So that is number one. Now, if you're choosing to live out in town, it's kind of a little different than living out in town in the States. So when you're looking for a rental in the States, you can get on an app, you can get on all sorts of like Redfin and rentals and all that, and you have pretty good options for finding a rental. There are stuff like that here, but you're not going to see all of the listings. So when you're looking for a rental here, I highly recommend you reach out to an agent so that they can help you find a house. So a lot of times here in Guam, they use real estate agents to help you find rentals. So that is going to be a recommendation. I don't have a lot of experiences with that since we do live on base, but I highly recommend, like I said, reaching out to a real estate agent, and they'll be able to offer you listings and find the perfect rental for you. And you can start that process before you get to island, at least making contact with a real estate agent and maybe finding someone you're comfortable with and work well together. That way that is taken care of before you get here. So moving on to cell phones. This is another big question that I see circling around, is what cell phone providers we have out here. So in Guam, there are three main cell phone providers. There is GTA, IT&E, and Docomo. None of them are great. We'll just say that off the bat. They're not horrendous. I have service pretty much everywhere I go for the most part, but it's not top grade A service like you're gonna get back in the States. So there is that. A lot of people these days are opting to go for what's called Google Fi. Google Fi is way cheaper than any of the options here on island, and you can still make calls on the island. However, you cannot set up Google Fi once you get to island. It is something that you have to set up back in the States, or if you're going to try to set it up, you have to send it to a family member back in the States to help assist you with setting it up. So if that's something you're interested in, I highly recommend looking it up and setting it up before you get to island. Otherwise, you will be left with the three options. Now, I will say that sometimes Google Fi has some issues. A lot of places on island cannot make long distance calls, and Google Fi is considered a long distance call. So for the longest time, if you had a long distance number and you didn't have a local Guam number, the hospital couldn't contact you, the schools can't contact you, and whatnot. Now, a lot of places have kind of upgraded. So like I work at the Child Development Center on base, and we were given in the last year a long distance cell phone to call the families that do have Google Fi and reach out. But not every place does have that option. So just keep that in mind if you're not going to get a local number. A lot of times you'll see this across the island. People use WhatsApp. It's a free app that lets you make calls and texts. It's very private, but you'll see that used a lot of the time on island. But big things like the Naval Hospital and McCool, the schools, they don't use that. So just like I said, keep that in mind. You might not always be able to get calls. But yeah, that is our cell phone options. They also are, when you're setting up your internet and things like that, they are the ones that you could go through for your internet as well. As for your vehicle, I highly recommend shipping at least one of your vehicles. We chose not to ship a second one because the Navy only ships one vehicle for you. The second vehicle you have to pay for. And our thoughts was, so we own my car, it was going to be easier to drive on a small island. I just have a Kia Optima, and we decided to sell my husband's truck just because we thought it would be harder to get around an island. We do miss our truck tremendously. It is hard to get things that we want. Say we buy a big piece of furniture, we have to pay the fee to get it delivered. It's kind of a hassle, so we do miss having a truck. However, we just couldn't warrant the cost of shipping a second vehicle if we shipped it here and then wanted to ship it back. Shipping can be in upwards of like $5,000 to ship it, and then $5,000 to ship it back, so we just didn't feel like spending $10,000 on shipping costs would be cost efficient for us. So I highly recommend shipping at least one vehicle though, because your options are limited on the island and they can be more expensive. There are a couple places that you can find cars on island. There are all of the dealerships. We have all the main big dealerships. We have like a Kia, Subaru, so on. We have all the dealerships. But like I said, they're more expensive. We also, if you're going to be looking for used cars, there are lots of Facebook pages to look on. And there is also what is called the lemon lot here on base. So basically people pay a fee to have their car sit in the lot and basically advertise their car for sale. We didn't find this the best when we were shopping around for a second car, just because a lot of the cars were overpriced. But you can get lucky if you are looking at the Facebook pages. That's how we ended up with our Guam Bomb, which is the title they give to cars basically falling apart on Guam. But it has served us well, and a lot of times people list stuff on there and they have to PCS last minute and they're selling stuff for cheap. So highly recommend joining some of the Facebook pages to look for cars. I will do a video if you guys are interested on all of the Facebook pages that you should join before coming to Guam, whether it's like car rentals or like MWR or things like that. If you guys are interested in that, leave me a comment below. But also for vehicles, when you're getting to island, obviously you're not going to have your vehicle that you shipped right away or be in the process of buying one, so you're going to want to rent a vehicle. I highly recommend booking your rental car before you get to island, because let me tell you, we're a small island and rental cars will sell out, especially if it's peak PCS season. If you choose to do it last minute and you're like, man, I'm going to need it tomorrow, chances are you are not going to be guaranteed a rental car. So we have a lot of tourists coming in, so just book it in advance if you can. Don't be like us. We chose to wait till the last minute. We were getting out of quarantine and we're like, oh, we need to book it for next week, and there was like barely anything left, or you're left with like the last pick and it could be like an expensive rental, but that's your only option. Another option is there are, like I was saying, Facebook pages where people list their vehicles, their own personal vehicles, for you to rent out. So they'll do like a flat $500 for 2 weeks or $500 for the whole month, and they'll rent out their personal vehicle, and all they ask is that you have, you can prove your insurance. So that is another option if you are looking for rentals and you waited till last minute and there's nothing left, or you just don't want to go through a big rental agency. You can rent from a lot of military spouses or military families. And moving on to the last category that I thought of for you guys, which is going to be the medical options that you have on island. So when you are trying to decide between keeping your TRICARE Prime overseas or TRICARE Select overseas, honestly on island you're going to want TRICARE Prime. TRICARE Select, our Prime medical is already mediocre at best, so being out in town is even worse, and there's not a lot of options if you're on Select. So highly recommend, I can't say this enough, to be on TRICARE Prime overseas. Now you're gonna have two options when you're on Prime. You are either going to be seen at Naval Hospital Guam, which is a really nice hospital, might I add. I obviously gave birth there, and I've done a whole birth story. I had a phenomenal experience. Or you're going to be seen at Branch Medical. Obviously all your big stuff is always going to be at the big hospital, but for your like primary care doctor, you might be seen at Branch. This is all based on where you live on the island. Branch right now is really small. It's in kind of a janky building, but they are working on building like a whole new facility. It's actually almost done. I'm not sure what the ETA is on it, but they are working on getting a lot of people switched over to Branch Medical because they're gearing up for the new hospital that's going to open. So those are your two options. You're either going to be seen at Naval Hospital or Branch. Obviously Branch is just for your primary care physician. If you're doing like, if you're giving birth or you're seeing any specialties, you're going to be seen at the Naval Hospital. But yeah, you guys, that wraps up some of the basic information of getting started on island, what our options are, and what you can expect. If I missed anything or you have any questions, leave them below. I will do my best to answer them or make a whole second video answering any of your questions. Go ahead and like this video if you like my military content, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss anything else. I will see you guys next Friday for another video. Bye guys.